Thank you very much. We're very proud of our island. We've got the most beautiful beaches on the East Coast, we feel like. Pawleys is the birthplace of the Pawleys Island hammock, the gray man, and of course, palmetto cheese. Some of you might have had that before. We also offer the most free beach access to the public in all of Georgetown County. But enough about me. I want to welcome someone here that we're all happy to see here at Pawleys Island. Russell is a native of South Carolina. He grew up on the Grand Strand. I'm not sure all of us here can say that. I can't say that. I've been here for 23 years and I love it here. Russell is also an Eagle Scout, which is pretty darn impressive in and of itself. And he attended an SEC school in South Carolina. He's a Gamecock. He's also a family man, married, has a small son, which I'm sure he's very proud of, and coming up well in Murrells Inlet. Lives in Murrells. Anybody else from Murrells Inlet? Myrtle Beach. So he may live in Murrells Inlet, but I can promise you, he's a very good friend to Pawleys Island. He's been a very good friend to me and very helpful from DC and here locally. So I want to thank him personally for that. So, without further ado, this gentleman right here is for lower taxes, less government, pro-Second Amendment, pro-life, and I can promise you, he's pro-Trump. Russell, thank you very much for having me.
I'm just going, there we go. How are y'all tonight? Y'all get enough food? Yeah. How was it? Was it good? Yeah. I haven't got any yet. I don't know if I need any, but I'll probably sneak some. We got a little bit of barbecue back here left. No one can touch it. It's mine. Welcome to, this is our first Freedom Hour that we've done this year. I love doing these. And one of the things that, we're in Washington a lot. There's a lot of things that are, particularly now, that are happening in Washington, and so we've been up there a ton. And one of the best ways that you keep in touch with your community is by doing this, by listening to the concerns of people that you represent, by talking about what's going on in Washington, answering questions, seeing how we can be accessible. And again, not everything that we do is about the votes that we take or the stances that we take. We have in our midst, and I'm going to miss people, but if you are a member of the Team Fry on the official side, raise your hand. We've got a ton of them here. From a staff perspective. Oh, Linda, I got you. You're Team Fry for life. But these men and women are instrumental, and I mean this, in helping people in our district, in our communities every single day. They do it with a smile on their face. They enjoy going to work. When you can take a veteran and you can deliver the benefits that they have earned, that they've been blocked and impeded for so long, and we're able to get that, have that success story, that's life-changing to somebody. And so that's why we do Susie here. She's a rock star. She's our Deputy District Director. We got Brian Braddock all the way from the PD, Florence, South Carolina. Brian's in the house. Jerry Shea's floating around here somewhere. He's our field representative. Out there, he's out there. Don't worry about him. We got Jason Freer here, who handles a lot of our veteran stuff. And I see the short one in the back, Catherine Thordahl. She's from Washington. She's from South Carolina, but she lives in Washington. She's down here this week with us. She does a fantastic job. I think did I get everybody? I think I got everybody. All right. Don't want to. So, what a difference a couple months makes. Right? What a difference. If you look, here's how you sum it up best. We went from a president who is awake for 4 hours and asleep for 20 to a president who's awake for 20 and sleeps for 4. That's the sea change. And again, I'm sure there are people in this room that don't agree with me, and that's perfectly fine. But there is a difference in governing style that you cannot deny, and the man is moving. He listened to the people. He campaigned on a certain set of ideals and platforms and ideas, and he has gone about implementing those ideas since day one. He's signed over 100 executive orders at this point. Everything from the Gulf of America, amen, to securing our southern border, to leveling the playing field with our allies and adversaries on trade. He has taken the White House by storm, and I think that's caught, quite frankly, a lot of the people on the other side of the political aisle a little flat-footed, right? And that's okay. That's okay. So here's kind of what I'm going to give a highlight of what is going on in D.C., and then we'll open it up for questions. So at the start of this, you had runaway rampant inflation. You had a wide open southern border that let millions of undocumented illegal immigrants into this country. You had an economy spiraling. People don't feel like they got ahead. And the election was really about a couple things. It was about the economy, it was about the border, but it was about people's pocketbooks too, right? And how they felt. And it doesn't, look, the jobs, people have jobs, but they're not making as much money when you compare it to the inflationary pressure as they once were. And so out from the other side, you had a candidate. Can y'all hear me in the back okay? Okay, good. Out from the other side, you had a candidate who campaigned on price fixing at the grocery store, DEI in the workforce, and a handful of other things, and word salad, and people resoundingly rejected that. In fact, President Donald Trump is the only president who started his second term with a better approval rating than his first term. Think about that in the history of our country. And so part one is what is he doing, and then part two is what can we do, or what are we working on. So with the executive orders, he has secured the border. You have 79 miles of border fence being erected right now. You've got the military at the border. You've got migration into this country from the southern border is down 90% in 1 month. Yeah. 1 month, down 90%. And again, we're welcoming people. If you want to come here, that's fine. You do it the legal way. You don't do it through an app on your phone that's like a Disney Fast Pass for getting into the country illegally. You do it the legal way, the proper way. And so the impact, of course, the sheriff's here. Sheriff Carter from Georgetown. Appreciate him. Let's give him a round of applause. And all of our law enforcement folks that are here, stationed around the room, thank y'all for what you do. But the sheriff will tell you that if you come to Georgetown County, and it's not just unique to Georgetown, but you have an escalating rise in crime, you have a rise in fentanyl overdoses. And where does that fentanyl come from? The precursors are assembled, made in China. They are assembled by the cartels south of the border, and they are shipped right across the border and into our communities. Good to see you. And so this is a national security issue. This is a public safety issue. There's a lot of things, and the president, I think, understands that, and that's why he acted on the border. You have any number of executive orders that level the playing field with respect to tariffs. And I think if you've ever experienced or read The Art of the Deal, this is important because countries pay lip service to the United States. They expect us to fund their operations. We do, a lot of times, fund their operations, but they don't step up to the plate. For instance, our neighbor to the north, under NATO, they're supposed to pay 2% of their GDP to the joint security of all the countries in NATO. And President Trump rattled that saber a couple years ago, and what happened? Countries started paying their 2%, except Canada, actually, and a few others. And so bringing them to the table and engaging with them, tariffs are a good way to achieve a policy that is beneficial to the American people. And before he was even in office, he had meetings with Canada, with Mexico, and others about the things that he wanted to implement. And guess what? They responded. And they're continuing to respond. And there's dialogue and exchange of ideas, and some of those are probably heated. But at the core of who he is and where I think he wants to go is that we're not going to be taken advantage of on the world stage again. We can't afford it. We're $36 trillion in debt. We can't afford to prop up the rest of the world when you, the taxpayers, are footing the bill for this. And for us and for our workers that are in manufacturing facilities and small business owners, these things are a way to level the playing field for our own people. So the other day he announced reciprocal tariffs. If you have a tariff on us, then we will have a tariff on you. And what that will do, one of two things will happen. Either the tariff will actually get implemented, or they will lower their tariff, which allows us to export more into those countries. That's 350,000 jobs, y'all. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of income to the American people. So I'm really pleased with what he's got going on. Now here's what Congress has got going on. One, largely we support what is going on with DOGE, with the border, all the things that he is doing. But your taxes are going up at the end of this year unless Congress acts. When they passed the Trump tax cuts in his first term, they were sunsetted. That after a certain amount of time, they are sunsetted and they'll go away. So if we don't act, now the left will say, it's millionaires and billionaires that are getting these tax breaks. Well, they do, but you know what? 207 million Americans also get that tax break, and they deserve that relief. Can you imagine a tax hike right now in the state of this economy? It'd be terrible. It'd be absolutely terrible. So Republicans in the House and the Senate, and I'm really pleased because on the outside before, there was all this friction between the White House, the House and the Senate, and they could never seem to get on the same page. But this year there is so much collaboration, cohesion, and President Trump's not just talking, he's listening. He's engaged with us routinely on things that are happening. And so reconciliation is coming through. Reconciliation is Congress's ability to balance its books. Kind of a novel concept for Washington, D.C., right?
Yeah.
So you can do the tax cuts in there, you can beef up border security, you can strengthen our military and make sure that they are ready for the challenges that we face domestically and abroad. You can boost energy production through things in reconciliation. There's a number of things that you can do, and I'm engaged in that fight. I want to deliver with President Trump for the American people because, quite frankly, that's why we got elected in the first place, to deliver on those promises. And it's not going to be Russell Fry's perfect bill. It's not going to be Mike Johnson's perfect bill, or maybe even President Trump's perfect bill. But it is my hope that it is a bill that delivers those wins for the American people. And so it's an exciting time. Look, we hamstring ourselves so much from an energy side, from an energy production standpoint. China is opening up power plant after power plant after power plant. Every single year, dozens of new coal, nuclear, natural gas, and it takes us 4 years to get a permit to even start construction on one, if you're lucky. And two things that you can do to help, one, the American people, but two, our national debt, is by having a sane energy policy, one that produces energy right here in this country. If you can, who here cares about the environment? Probably everybody, right? Everybody cares about the environment. If you want it done cleaner, do it in the United States. If you want it done elsewhere, and it's not in your backyard, but if you want it done elsewhere, then ship it off to China and elsewhere. We have an obligation to meet the needs of the middle class, the working families, the retirees in this country. We have an obligation to our national debt to have a sane and sensible energy policy. Stop propping up one at the expense of everything else. Stop thwarting progress for the sake of the spotted salamander. People are done with that. People are done with that. And it happens too, right? I mean, there are groups out there that fund lawsuits against permits just to delay. And so it's an exciting time in Washington. For me, on the Judiciary Committee with Chairman Jim Jordan, on the Energy and Commerce Committee, I'm new to that committee, there are big issues that we have to tackle. The spending side in reconciliation, we also have to pare back and cut some of the waste that is in our federal government. And if you don't think there's waste, I would invite you to study a GAO report, Government Accountability Office report from last year, that estimates that there is between $250 billion and $520 billion a year that is fraud, waste, and abuse in our federal government. Think about that money. And if we found it, and if we rooted it out, we could address the national debt. We could get veterans off the streets in our communities. And heck, we might be able to pave a few roads around this country. And so with that, look, it's an exciting time, but I want to hear from y'all. What's on your mind? Jason here is going to bounce around with the microphone, and then we'll answer some questions from the audience.
Just want to let you know our mayor from Georgetown is behind you.
And the mayor of Georgetown, Carol Jarvis, you're doing a great job, by the way. Georgetown is doing a great job. Good to see you, sir. I don't know if they can hear, but they saw our smiling faces. So.
On the money that DOJ is discovering
Yes.
that has been fraud, waste, and abuse, what do you think they're gonna do with that money? Would you like to see done with that money? And my second question is, can you explain? 'Cause we had that conversation the other day about the committees that you're on, which were very important to me and enlightening. Can you explain how you wound up on the energy committee and what happened with oversight?
Yep, great question. All right, so Doge. Look, we're $36 trillion in debt. You can have studies and all this stuff and try to figure out what's wrong with our federal government, or you can hire an innovator, bring him in. He's doing it for free to look at and have a team look at the ways that our government has waste, fraud, and abuse. And it happens routinely. Again, I invite you to look at that GAO report about the billions of estimated waste that we have. So DOGE, I think, is highlighting something that's really problematic. One, it's an Article 1 problem. Congress is Article 1 of the Constitution. And Congress should be the ones making these decisions about where this money goes. But we have abdicated over decades, that responsibility to unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats, right? And so they take USAID, the Agency for International Development. They had $23 million for Sesame Street in Iraq. They have millions of, the list, where's my list? Hold on. Yeah, they had that too.
14 pages long.
This was fun. 59 million sent by FEMA to house illegal immigrants at high-end New York City hotels. That was just a couple weeks ago. 881 million on 89 contracts in the Department of Education to one of them being $1.5 million to observe mailing and clerical operations at a mail center. That sounds like a pretty good gig. What do you think?
Yeah.
29 DEI contracts saving $101 million. The list goes on. I mean, so I think what DOGE is doing, and it's not crazy, it's and Elon will say this, that it's pretty basic technology. It's like 10, 15 years old. That he's surprised that the federal government doesn't already have this. And so these are employees within various agencies. So when he goes to the IRS, he doesn't physically go, but there is a person that is appointed by Treasury that is an IRS employee that is assigned to DOGE, and their job is to look at these issues. And they've, I think, $55 billion so far that they have found that they have canceled. And so look, we are shoveling money out the door. Our federal government is shoveling money out the door. It's got to stop. What happens with that money at that point, operationally, is that it stays within that agency, right? I mean, so if it's appropriated to that agency, but they cancel the contracts, it just sits there, and the administration can use it for within the parameters of that agency, absent some congressional.
Democratic solution.
Well, that's what USAID was, right? I mean, so, and the reason I think they got busted first, USAID, is because the president came in, issued executive orders. He said, look, I want to freeze on all grants, because I want to make sure that they're complying with the executive orders that I have given. And USAID, in defiance of those executive orders, was still shoveling money out the door. And so, you know, they put themselves, they put that target on their back, and they have been unresponsive to the Congress for years. And so for us, we can ask questions in a hearing, we can subpoena them, but they dance and dodge and move all around it, and they never actually get to the answer that you're trying to seek on behalf of the constituents that you have. So I think what he's doing is a little bit revolutionary, it's a little bit unorthodox, but it's producing results. The Energy and Commerce Committee, just briefly, it is the oldest committee in Congress. 70% of the GDP in this country touches the jurisdiction of the Energy and Commerce Committee. It's huge. It touches energy, it touches tourism, it touches healthcare, it touches manufacturing, it touches AI to some extent, this new stuff that we're dealing with. It touches telecom and what's going on with broadband spectrum and all this stuff. It touches a lot. So it's an honor to be there. It's not often that a sophomore gets onto a committee of that magnitude, but I'm pumped about it because it's Yes, sir.
Good evening, Congressman. I have to tell you, I'm a converted Republican. First president, Republican that voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah, welcome. Welcome.
There's a question that I have that's a bit concerning to me pertaining to the taxation on Social Security, whether or not that is just a pipe dream or is that going to happen? And the security of the status of Medicare, because there's a lot of gray-haired people in here. Mine has died. So
I'm not gray at all, I don't think. I don't know.
so I'm just curious, what is the possibility of the completion or acquisition, whatever the word would be, for the Social Security and for Medicare?
Okay, great question. On Social Security, this is part of President Trump's agenda. We are trying to put that into the tax package in which we have. I think it makes a lot of sense. When you go through reconciliation, it's a balance sheet, right? So you got one side of revenues and one side of outflows. Here, we've got to balance that out. So if there's spending, then you have to also have savings for the taxpayers. So that's our task, but that's on the president wants an extension of his prior tax cuts. He wants no tax on tips for all the waitresses and bartenders in the room. And he wants, among other things, Social Security. So I think it's possible. It's very early yet in assembling that package, but it's possible. Medicare, I think the president's been pretty clear. He doesn't want to touch Medicare. And that is a big, unfortunately, it's a big driver of our national debt. And there are tons of savings that I think that you could have. But I think we can get there in other vehicles. Medicaid being one. There's a number of fees and things that you can add to asylees when they come to the country. These things all bolster the revenue side of what we're doing. But the president has been pretty clear he doesn't want to touch Medicare. I think you could touch Medicare, quite frankly, without impacting the beneficiary. We send out billions of dollars in improper payments every year, for example, right? There's a ton that you can do that doesn't actually impact the person receiving the care, but which will save a ton of money for us in the long run. So that's a longer goal. We're going to get our spending under control, but we've got our marching orders, so to speak, and we're going to go about implementing the president's agenda. So good question. Yes, sir.
Russell, thanks for coming out again.
Yeah.
This is the second time I've been here that you've been here.
Yeah, it's great.
Very coincidental. Now, I'm a veteran, and I've just recently gone through a request to see a dermatologist. Normally it takes about 4 weeks. Once you call up your service, or it's a dentist, it doesn't make any difference. I was wondering, and I know you like to sponsor bills, because I remember one of your very first ones that you sponsored that went through and became a bill. So I follow that stuff. So the request is for all the veterans who are in here that we have a very cumbersome VA system in order to get service out here in the community. You have to call and request it, because a lot of times they don't have those doctors in the primary care center, or you have to go to, Charleston or Ralph H. Johnson. And neither one is I don't want to drive, because I live in Georgetown.
Right.
Now, would you sponsor a bill, because I'm not sure if Doge is going to look at it, but take Doge and do the VA what you're doing to everybody else. Make it efficient so that I can have a VA card, just like a lot of these people have a Medicare card. They can call up any provider, a dentist, a dermatologist, make an appointment, show up for the appointment, put the card, give the receptionist a card, we'll copy it, you get your treatment, you walk out.
Yep.
Well, I can't do that as a veteran.
Yep, I know. Would I support that bill? Yes, I would. I would, and I'll tell you, there was a bill last year, it was by Andy Biggs, and I can't remember the title of the bill, but it was a pilot program to set up just that. Because here's the frustration that we have. The one thing that government should do from a healthcare perspective well is care for our veterans, right? You all agree with that? And fortunately for us, I think in Myrtle Beach, at least when I talk to veterans, people are largely happy with the Myrtle Beach one. Some issues there, but largely happy. But there are some veteran VA clinics, if you will, around the country that have not lived up to that promise. To me, if you sign the dotted line for this country at risk to yourself and your life, then you should get that card, and that card should be personal and affordable to you, meaning that you can go wherever the heck you want to go to get the care that you need. That's at least my philosophy on it. And so I would definitely support that.
The only problem with that is most VA places, it depends on what your disability rating is.
That's true.
If you're above 50%, you get everything.
That's true.
If you're below 50%, say 10%, you barely get in it, but then you still gotta pay for your medication, okay? Look, I started off at 70, but I come down here and they moved me to 60.
Yep.
I still get care, except I get vision now, but I don't get dental.
Oh,
Okay?
you been to
It
our
should
office
be-
yet? Let's look at that.
I mean,
For
it
you,
should
let's
be-
look at that.
It should be across the board, and when you serve, because I started off in fire protection. Fire protection about killed me twice, but I survived. But yet I still didn't get the benefits. I mean, AFFF, I don't have a lot of the symptoms and stuff, but it's, you know, the things that you get with AFFF, I'm waiting,
Right.
you know.
Well, one, from your personal side, let's see if we can help you on that. We're happy to do that.
I appreciate it.
I
Thank
mean
you.
that. I mean that. That's him. That's the guy. Jason, who else we got questions from?
I got a gentleman up here.
Right here? All right, then I think we got one in the back too.
Yes, sir. I'll go back there.
Yeah, good evening. I'm wondering if you can address the cutting of grants and research for scientific endeavors, including Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and the canceling of the NIH grants, which have not yet been reinstated, and scientists are on a stand down. And I'm wondering if you can also address the cutting of the USAID money for foreign food assistance and $400 million worth of food that is rotting in ports right now, which is not getting to the people that are needed, and the workers for USAID scattered throughout the United States and the world, mostly throughout the world, that have fled, escaped, or are hiding underground, whose lives are in danger because the aid was cut for USAID. And perhaps you could also address the person that died because the USAID was cut in Thailand at the hospital that was being funded by USAID. So all this USAID cutting and other cuts to grants, while it makes nice sound bites, is not always fruitful. And I'm also wondering if you could address that a lot of the sound bites that you read off have no actual factual basis.
Do you have a question?
Could you address the grants, food rotting in ports, and international workers that our lives are in danger?
So with respect to grants, I think the president has been pretty clear that he is the new executive of our federal government, the agent, the caretaker of our federal government. When these pauses on grants were issued, the intent is to make sure that what we say we're doing and what we actually do matter, and that they match up. When you look at the way that grants are done, any group can come in and apply for grants. And this was the problem, I think, with some of the USAID stuff, is that people have these, again, you go through the list, and they are based, in fact. These things went out the door. They funded things that are not who we are as a country. And so does USAID have a function with food? Sure. I think that's one of the big purposes of what we do. But the accountability is lost on that agency when they are shoveling money out the door in defiance of an executive order. And so I think the president is right, and the American people expect, let's take a look at this holistically and make sure that USAID is performing the functions in which it was supposed to perform. That's what I would say about that. So anything that the grants We are a benevolent country. We always have been. We have helped. You asked Secretary Rubio his thoughts on USAID, and he's been in the middle of these fights. They're unaccountable. They don't respond. And when you ask them questions, they act like you are bothering them. Well, he was at the time a senator from Florida, elected by Floridians to perform and advocate on their behalf. And so USAID is a very imperfect agency, and I think some of the stuff that has come to light has shown that. Does it mean that they have good functions? Sure. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't look under the hood at some of the waste, fraud, and abuse that is happening in that. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
I'm Steve Howell from Bucksport.
Bucksport. All right, Steve.
Retired teacher, and I also worked with Greg Embry in the solicitor's office for years. We have a situation going on at Bucksport that I'm going to drop some paperwork off at your office.
Please do.
But it basically, in a nutshell, y'all heard of how FEMA mistreated the Trump supporters in Florida and North Carolina. Well, the same thing just happened in Bucksport. There's a dirt road that divides the Bucksport community in half. On the east side of that road is 100% Democrats, 100%. On the west side of that road is about 97% Republican. Well, when we get a major flood, the water comes out of the river up this dirt road. And about 3 miles, it tees. It goes on the east side of that road and on the west side. I live on the west side. When it floods, the east side of the community gets about 4 foot of water in their yard. We also get 4 foot of water in our yard. And about 6 months ago, without any permits, Horry County and FEMA, DHEC, Corps of Engineers built a 9-foot dam on that road high. I have pictures to document it. So in the future, when there's a major flood, Horry County, the east side of that road, which is 100% Democrat, will get no flooding because it can't cross the 9-foot dam. The west side of that road where we live, with about 800 people, will get their 3, 4, 5 foot that they used to get, and we'll get ours also, and we're going to get about a 12-foot flood in our houses. And I've met with the county and FEMA and everybody, and we can get no help. But it's against the law what they did. Plainly, it's against the law, and they did all this with no permits.
Well, thanks for that. We'll look at that. And you are absolutely right, by the way. FEMA played games during the last set of hurricanes that we had. And I said, well, maybe this is just an isolated incident by a rogue person. You know, you don't pay the whole agency. Except this also happened in South Carolina. It's happened in Georgia. There has been so many documented from Florida. There have been so many documented cases of people who were not serviced because they had a Trump sign in their yard or because they were a Republican in some way and showed that out there. There has been a lot of evidence to suggest and show that that's actually the case. I think it's, again, when natural disasters are not partisan, right? You go and you help people. And for FEMA to go, we're not going to go to your house, sir, because of this, because of your political beliefs or whatever, I think is reprehensible. And unfortunately, that has happened in the last couple of years. We're happy to look at that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, question, comment sort of thing. Funding of Social Security. The way it's been set up and still is set up now is that employees pay into Social Security when they're working. And at some point, if they make a lot of money, they reach a cap. I don't know what the cap is this year. It's fairly high. Let's just say $150,000 for argument's sake. Once you reach that cap and you make $200, $300, $400, $500, $1 billion, you don't pay any more Social Security above that cap. If you would tax those people above that cap, Social Security would be more solvent. Plain and simple. I said the same thing. I happen to be a Democrat. I went to a Biden rally down in Georgetown when he ran. I asked him the same question. Never got an answer. But this is a really important thing, okay? We could make a lot more money going into Social Security if we taxed the people above that cap who are very wealthy, okay? We know why they don't want to tax them.
Well, sir, thanks for being here, braving this very Republican crowd. I think, and I mean that, we're happy to have you here. I haven't studied that enough to comment intelligently about it yet. But what I will say is, and I'm happy to do it, what I will say is this. The problem that I have, and I think the American people have with the left as it pertains to taxation, is that they pick the millionaires and billionaires and think that that's going to solve the problem, right? Like if billionaires paid their fair share, we could solve our national debt. Except there's studies that show that that's not the case, right? And so I'm happy to look at this particular proposal. I haven't seen that before, but the problem is that it becomes a pipe dream. It's like, and again, they pay their taxes. They pay a lot of taxes actually, but it's not a fix to the issues that they present. It is not a fix that if you go tax all the millionaires and billionaires a much higher threshold, hell, you could take all their money. It doesn't solve the problem, and you disincentivize innovation in this country. Well, look, and I just say I'm happy to look at it respectfully. I'm happy to look at that, but my natural instinct would be to say that's probably not a great idea to solve. I just don't think that that's going to solve the Social Security crisis in and of itself. There's a lot more that needs to be done. But thanks for coming.
Hey, Congressman, thanks. I asked you a question when you were between the antlers in Georgetown in the fall regarding the debt deficit and how it was going to be addressed if, in fact, at that time we didn't know how the election was going to go, but if President Trump was talking about the tax cuts. At that time he said, well, he's going to have the tariffs, there's going to be other things, we'll wait and see what comes up. So here we are this time, and with the budget, the proposed budget that was just cleared the House, there's a $4 trillion tax cut, $4 trillion increase in the debt ceiling, and which means 8 million away from where we are. How is the debt and the deficit going to be rectified? There's less coming in, more going out, and I didn't see any plan as to where money is going to be applied to bring that monstrous 36 trillion, as you pointed out, debt, which right now our debt ceiling, our debt service is $1 trillion a year just in the interest. How is that going to come about, and what can you do to try to help that?
Great question. So I'm going to get real wonky for a minute. Can I get wonky for a minute? Yeah. Can your eyes not glaze over? All right.
We'll try.
So one, in the reconciliation vehicle that you talked about, tax cuts cost on paper that amount of money, right? The savings that we are having on the mandatory spending. Now we can't touch, in reconciliation, we cannot touch those securities. So that's automatically off the table, that's by the law. So from the reconciliation standpoint, you have to have a number of savings that are out there. A couple things I think that also bolster the idea that this would be revenue neutral is, one, Trump has, by executive order, for every one regulation that is added, there are 10 that are cut. That actually bolsters the economy. The regulatory cuts that he had in his first term really helped unleash the American economy. You don't get out of debt just by paying off the debt with tax revenues. You also get out of debt by bolstering your energy production in this country, because there are royalties assessed to that, plus people are having more money in their pocket to spend on other things. You also get there by general economic growth. And so the regulatory environment, that also is going to come with a price tag affixed to it. And so we saw this happen. There are studies out there by tons of economists on if you do various different things on the regulatory front, you're going to have a very good impact on the balance sheet of the United States. And so these are some of the things, I think, to get really into the weeds, these are some of the things that are built in to that package on how we say these tax cuts are good for the American people. 207 million of them, plus small businesses, all benefit from these tax cuts. In addition to that, we're also going to have these savings on the mandatory side, not Social Security and not Medicare according to the president, but we're going to have these savings on the mandatory side, and then you have the pro-growth policies, the regulatory environment, and then the final tranche is the discretionary spending. When we talk about appropriations season in Washington, D.C., these are all the various agencies that we also fund that are not on the mandatory side of what we spend money on. So I think between all of those, we got a dang good shot.
Sir, that's dealing with the reconciliation and the deficit.
Correct.
How about the debt?
The debt.
Money has to be assigned for that.
Correct.
Not just keeping what we spend this year level through movement.
Correct.
But
And the growth of that regulatory environment from the economy and the treasury and the energy policies that we have, that helps deliver that deficit reduction. That's the goal. And again, we didn't get here $36 trillion overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight, but this is a good step forward. This product is going to be a good step forward.
would you be in favor of earmarking income or monies that are generated through whatever means to go to be earmarked to cut the debt, to pay that 36?
Yeah, I mean, I would be, but I would also want future Congresses to hold that and not make it a slush fund, right? I mean, that's the problem, is that if power changes hands in 1 or 2 years, you're back to square one again if they take that off the table. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Bill Rice from North Myrtle Beach.
Hey, Bill.
And contrary to family opinion, I've been cut off the family tree by you defeating your predecessor. But I have a question. I just want to pursue the Social Security question one more step further. Are you familiar with John Kennedy, the senator from Louisiana?
Yes, sir.
He says there's hundreds of thousands of people that are dead that are receiving Social Security checks and they're being cashed. Now, something is seriously off the rails on that one. Also, I am hearing here recently that immigrants are getting funding for housing, purchasing homes, purchasing automobiles, free education, and that money is coming from somewhere. Most of the people in here are familiar with Social Security. But I have a lady friend that 2 years ago received a notice from Social Security that she had been overpaid back to 2016. Have received more than a dozen letters indicating that there's been a recalculation because of prior errors 12 times. Now, are you fixing the same problem 12 times, or are you not doing anything? As a result of that cut, her Social Security has been reduced by 20% on a monthly basis. Have been to the local Social Security office a multitude of times, and they keep indicating they can't do anything until a computational center in Birmingham or Philadelphia addresses the computation error. Keep asking for the reason and the numbers on how the calculation was made, have yet, after 2 years, not had a response. Getting very frustrated because the lady is suffering with a 20% reduction in Social Security. I'd like to sit down and go through the numbers with you. If I could arrange an appointment at your office.
We're happy to do that, Susan.
Okay, who want I see?
Susie right here.
Okay.
Or that man with the microphone too.
Outstanding.
Thank you for being.
Thank you, and sorry for you getting excommunicated from your family. I apologize for that.
Well, I'm still planning on voting for you.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate that. You're exactly right. So this is one of the things that Doge actually found, and this came out, I think today. 3.5 million people between the ages of 120 and 129. 4 million people between the ages of 130 and 139, and 3.6 million people ages 140 to 149. So I don't know about you, but I don't think people have lived that long since biblical times, right? I mean, it's been kind of a long time. This is the kind of stuff that really frustrates people. And you talk about solvency, sir. This is a big issue. If you take the GAO study, let's assume on the conservative side that the GAO study is accurate, that there is $300+ billion a year that is going out in fraud, waste, and abuse. $300 billion. Over 10 years, that's $3 trillion. You talk about pay fors for the national debt. That's a start. And so this is maddening that we live in the 21st century, that the world is at our fingertips, and we are still having people enrolled in Social Security that are 150 years old. That's just crazy to me. I don't know about that, but maybe. And again, it's people asleep at the switch. These are government. Look, there are really good public servants in our federal government. In fact, 2 of them are sitting right here. They're retired from federal service. They did a great job. But there are a lot of people, and if you ask people on the inside now, they're frustrated because they want to work, they want to do what's right for the American people, but there's a lot of people who justify their paychecks by shuffling papers and pretending to look busy, right? So we can't do that. We cannot do this anymore. And so I'm excited about the opportunities that we have on Social Security with DOJ and some others on highlighting this and making these things solvent. We owe it to the next generation and this one who have paid into that system to make sure that it is solvent. And if we don't act, then the program goes down. And so the longer that we wait to get serious, the worse and the harder it gets. We owe it to y'all to do it, and that's what we're going to do. Yes, sir.
Congressman, we got time for one more question.
One more. We're on a roll.
Hi, Congressman.
Don't ask me to sing, because I'm not going to do it.
Well, first, I'm a mental health counselor, and I love my community, and so I have some issues about that, but I don't think I can get to all of it. But one is, how many people have been fired in the federal workforce? Because I have a sibling that works in DC and who lost their job with no explanation, no benefits. They can't even get unemployment. So how many people have fired, and how is that making America great? And number 2 is, how are you going to lower groceries? Because that's what was run on.
The people who have left the federal workforce or been terminated or fired is 3% of our federal workforce. That's it. Clinton had a much larger. And so we want to go back to the 90s. Clinton had, I think, 250,000, 300,000 people that took these things. So look, I support the president in doing this. I really do. The growth of the federal bureaucracy is insane. And so we have to get back to the basics. And so for people who are, I think probationary status is the correct term, most of the terminations have come from people who are on that probationary status. That they had just been hired, they haven't been there long.
Well, that's not true. He has been a career federal worker.
Okay, well.
And he has lost his job, and his family is suffering. How many other people have lost their jobs?
Well, listen.
Everybody go like this.
It is.
Take this over to her so she can go like this.
Again, there are buyouts for people. Okay. Ma'am, I'm sorry. Listen, I'm happy to talk to your brother or help him, but the growth of our federal government and the amount of people that we employ is astronomical. And so from a case-by-case basis, I hate it for them, but there is a lot of opportunity in this country. There's jobs everywhere in this country. Absolutely everywhere. Why do you think that you need a federal job to support a family? You don't. There's so much opportunity in the private side to do exactly these things. So I would say that this is a necessary thing for the federal government, and we've done this before. President Clinton did this before.
So putting hundreds of Americans out of work
Anyway.
is good for America. And good for Biden put them out of work too.
A lot of people get fired every day.
Go find a job somewhere.
All right, next question. One more? What's that? Yeah, go ahead.
We know.
Jobs in
Go find
Georgetown
somebody who can
County.
help you.
All right, so as it pertains, how do we get jobs in Georgetown County?
Can you help me?
So one of the
I'd love
things.
for you to help me.
The loss of International Paper was a big hit. It was a very big hit to Georgetown County. The state, your local stakeholders that are out here, county council, city council, are working really hard to figure out how to make sure that those jobs come back in some way and that they support the region as well. So the blessing of International Paper was that you had the paper mill, but you also had all the people who brought the lumber in, you had the truckers, the people who harvested the lumber, you had a lot of stuff. So what I would like to see is something that kind of supports that already pre-established industry in this area. One of the benefits of Georgetown County and South Carolina generally is that it is a favorable tax climate. It is a good place to do business. You have a willing state government and local government that wants these opportunities for the next generation of Georgetonians. And so, and for us, we're happy to play whatever role we can to make sure that that happens. That growth is good. That's good for family. Carl Anderson, who's a Democrat state representative, he's a great guy. Don't always agree with him, but he's a nice guy. He says, I grew up in Georgetown, and people would come into Georgetown and they'd say, what's that smell? And Georgetonians would respond, that's the smell of money. So let's bring it back. Listen, thank you all for being here. I'm going to stay for a little bit after this, but thank you all for coming to our first Freedom Hour in the new year. Really appreciate it. Listen, we don't always agree. Obviously, we saw that tonight. But I'm here to help in whatever way I can. And so we had some folks today that might need assistance with a veteran claim or an IRS issue or whatever. That's what we do. That's what we do best. And in conclusion, let me tell you about a story on why I love what I do. There was a gentleman, I'd never met him before. He was an amateur race car driver in a car accident, paralyzed from the neck down, could no longer speak anymore, and he was weeks away from getting kicked out of his house, from losing absolutely everything. And our office picked up the phone again. I had never met this gentleman before in my life. We picked up the phone and we helped him, and not only did we get him on disability, but we got him back pay. And I saw him one time. I was invited to go speak at a church in Dillon County. And somebody said, I want you to meet somebody. And I walk over to this gentleman and I meet him for the first time. And he tells me he can't speak, so somebody's speaking for him. But he breaks down into tears because this office had an impact on his life. And so that's why I do what I do, because it's important, it matters. And in that moment, we were the only thing that he had to get the financial security that he needed, and we delivered. And for that, I thank my staff for being freaking awesome. Thank y'all for being here. There's some leftover barbecue up here if you want some. No, I'm good. Good to see y'all.